In this lesson, I want to talk about adding some grit to our shot, and we're going to continue the look that we had at the end of our RGB mixer look lesson to create this new look by adding some grit. Now, before we do that, what I'm going to do here is just switch my scopes here over to my vector scope. I'm going to add another node, and we're just going to center our color up or fix it a little bit here. Let's head on over to our primary wheels. Just grab the offset. Let's just center this up. Just because I want to have the color in our talent's face looking a little bit more, I'll say quote unquote normal. Now, for the look that we're going to be creating, I have to zoom back just a little bit here because I need a little bit more screen real estate for our nodes. Now, the work that we're going to do is going to happen between the node that we just added and our lookup table. So the first thing we want to do is add some silver. The beauty part of this technique is that silver will add rawness to the image and at the same time increase contrast, which again makes the image appear slightly sharper, which is a key ingredient in the creation of grit. We're going to play off of the lift and the gain by lowering our luminance value, or the Y value on the lift, and we're going to increase the Y value on the gain. Now, the beauty part of this technique is that we're not actually increasing the saturation to our image. Let me show you what I mean. Option or Alt and S. Let's head to our primary bars. Now, with the lift, I don't want to bring it down too much. Let's bring it down to somewhere about minus 0.05, minus 0.06. That's pretty good. And what I'm going to do now is take the gain value and bring it up to somewhere around 0.15. Somewhere about there is pretty good. Now, it might not look like a substantial change has happened, but take a look here. Look at this. That's the before and that's the after. Take a look at how much silver has now been added to this. So I'm going to give this node a little bit of a label. We're going to call it silver. Make sure I spell that right. Retention. Now, playing around with the unganged luma curve can give much of the same result. You can get greater precision, but it can be difficult to control. The only issue with what I've just done is that we've actually accentuated some colors that we don't necessarily want to accentuate. Sort of increase the silver we've added to this image. It makes the folders in the background stand out. Let's head on over to our curves. We know which curve we're using, hue versus saturation. Let's make sure we add another node, Option or Alt and S. Let's select that color. Now keep in mind, we have some orange in our talent's face. Now, if we hadn't have gone in and adjusted and rebalanced everything out, we probably could have left this the way that it was and not worried too much about what was happening to the color in his face, but that's okay. I'm not going to be pulling too much orange out anyways. Now, what I'm going to do is just reset this a bit. Let's just grab this. I'm going to come back over here to orange. Let's select it. Perfect. You'll see there. I'm just going to drag it south a little bit, not too much. You'll see that orange has just been muted a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit easier on the eyes. A little bit of colors come out of our talent's face, but I am okay with that. So let's turn this node back on, Command or Control and D on the keyboard. I am going to name this. Let's call this, we're going to give it the node label, Orange Reduction. Another way to add grit to the image is to create muted blacks. That means to keep the blacks black, but reduce the nuances of gray that you're going to find there. Let's add that other node, Option or Alt and S on the keyboard. And we're going to head back to the main curves window. We're going to deal with the soft clip down here. Let's set the low value. And to do this, I want to make sure I'm showing the waveform. We're going to put this up around between 60 and 70. Now, what's important to keep in mind is you'll notice it more so in the curves window over here than we see it over here in the waveform because we're obviously zoomed back a lot. And you'll notice as I start dragging, nothing seems to be happening until we hit about 60 or 70 where we can see that color start to get clipped or those black levels start to get clipped. Let's just set it somewhere around 70. What I'm now going to do is simply grab that low soft, and we're just going to soften it up a little bit, like that, somewhere around 20. Now obviously the more that we adjust the low, the more washed out that image is going to become. That's why I think somewhere around 70 is probably pretty good. What we just did might not be readily apparent, but as with everything we've learned up till this point, it's a combination of techniques that creates the final result, or the look that we're going for. We can see that we have a lot less detail in the shadow and that the nuances are diminished, but in an image with more dark areas, this will be more apparent. So let's call this node label soft clip. The next step is to work directly with the sharpness controls. Option or Alt and S to add another node. What we're now going to do is head to the blur section. I know it sounds kind of funny that we're going to add grit by heading to blur, but I'm actually already in the sharpen drop down because obviously by default we'll be in blur. If we grab the radius and just start blurring it, that's what's going to happen. Let's undo that. Let's come back to blur and let's switch that to be sharpen. Now really there's three parameters we're going to adjust in here: radius, coring softness, and level. Now let's just put the radius. I'm just going to bring it down just slightly. Let's bring it down to about 0.45. Let's talk about now coring softness and level and what the difference is between the two. Well, level is how much edge detail we're going to get in and sharpen, how much of it's going to be sharpened. Coring softness is how much of a feather transition is going to happen between the sharp and the unsharp. So let's set these, we're probably going to set them somewhere about the same. Let's set them about 45 for each. Now the only problem with this is that I don't actually really see what's happening as far as what is being selected, what's being softened. But we can actually see this by navigating right up here and turning our highlight on. Now you'll notice now exactly what is being sharpened. Look at the hair detail. Be careful what sharpening can do to specular highlights, as it can lead to clipping or strange artifacts very quickly. Some colorists are isolating out the highlights completely when adding sharpness because of this. It's important to understand that this is not a one-size-fits-all game. The result of sharpening is of course going to vary from shot to shot. And now if I switch back, if I turn highlight off and I come in, let's just take a look at the detail in our talent's face here. I'm just going to turn it off and turn it on. It's very slight. So let's just make a little bit more of an adjustment here by dragging south a little bit. There we go. And now let's turn it off and turn it on. You see how much grit we get back now? There's way too much sharpening here, but we can clearly see that it brings out the texture. There is an alternate way to do this, and that is to sharpen only the Luma channel. That will result in a bit cleaner sharpening. But let's name this node first. What we're now going to do is we're going to right click, we're going to add a node, we're going to add a parallel node just so we can see the difference between the two. Now I'm just going to turn that node off. I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add a color space conversion here. We're going to switch to the lab color space. Now what exactly is the lab color space? L stands for luminance. A is the values from green to red, and B is the values from blue to yellow. So this is what is now making up the color and the luminance values in our image. So let me show you how this actually comes into play. I'm going to come back to our color wheels here, and I'm only going to talk about the offset here. Now in the offset, remember, keep in mind we talked about RGB now being mapped to L, A, and B. L representing not red anymore, but luminance values. So you'll see if I come in and I grab that and adjust it, we actually have to make sure we're on the right node here. But if I grab it and adjust it, take a look at what's happening. Red is not being adjusted or added to the image. Luminance is. Now, if I reset this, let's just double click on it. There we go. If we now get in and adjust the A value, what this is going to do is it's going to give you value adjustments from green up to red. And now with the B slider, what this is representing is values from blue all the way up to yellow. So therefore, if I come back here, let's double click, what I can actually do now is again set this to be about 45, set this to be about 45, unlink these values and simply adjust the red slider to add sharpening to luminance only. If you want to try to add another layer of complexity to your sharpening, you can create some depth by adding a tad of blur to the other two chroma channels. Alright, now we have a few more techniques in our arsenal that will help us to create interesting and unique looks.